what I'm going to give you is I'm going to give you two principles today to work with. And of course, these are the two principles that I always share with anybody who's on a journey of any sort, body, mind journey, these two principles. And what I do want to mention to you is that these principles are, so Ayurveda allows you to do something called inference. Before you start studying Ayurveda and you study the scriptures, the first part of it says that as a practitioner, you're allowed to take this information and make inferences for your generation, right? Because these Shastras were written 5,000 years ago. So these are the inferences that I have made from the text, right? Using textual reference, trying to crystallize it and put it in two principles. The first principle is your body, when you understand the ecosystem for your body, the climate of your body is what we need to understand. Just as I gave an example of understanding that we understand how it feels like outside when it's a good day. We need to understand what does a good day in your body feel like, or what is the good climate for your body. And that climate is warm and moist. Now, this to me is $1 billion idea. And how do I know that it's warm and moist, right? I mean, just because I'm telling you it's warm and moist, it should be warm and moist? No, because we want to try and understand and think about where this warm and moisture comes in, right? Firstly, we are warm-blooded. I'm going to give you my evidence for why it's warm and moist. Anything that comes out of the human body is warm and moist, whether it's your blood, it's your urine, your breath, the mother's milk. You'll know right away if you go to the bathroom and you're urinating and it's a little too hot, you'll know right away that something doesn't feel right. Similarly, if you just exhale on your hand, it's warm and it's moist. There's a moistness about it. The mother's milk, for anybody who's a nursing mother or has nursed in the past, you know that it's warm and moist. And so is your blood. If you ever go to take a blood test and you hold one of those test tubes in which they carry the blood, it's warm and moist. So the climate in your body is warm and moist. That's where it thrives. And how do I know, right? If you think about where anything, when you want to grow anything in any climate in the world, what is a good fertile land for things to grow agriculturally? Warm and moist. If it's too hot, it can't grow. Nothing can grow. If it's too cold, forget it. It's Alaska. It's the North Pole. If it's overly moist, like monsoon, there's going to be destruction. If it's overly hot, there's going to be destruction. Right? So when you are anywhere in the universe where there is warm and moist, there is potential for growth. What happens in monsoon in India? I mean, I was from Mumbai. I lived in Mumbai. It becomes hot and humid. The minute it's humid, there's parasites, there is mold. Even in your own, even in your own environment, anywhere, when humidity collects, when it's overly humid, beyond the moisture that is required, or it's overly hot, things start to ferment. When things start to ferment, then there is kind of bacteria production. When people talk about this whole probiotic environment that they're still wrapping their head around, what is this probiotic environment? That probiotic environment is the perfect balance between warm and moist in your system. When it becomes overly, like again, I'm saying overly hot and humid, people get something called candida or yeast infections or parasites in their stomach. When it becomes, cold, people's digestive systems are just cold and windy and nothing can happen. So again, coming back to this idea, right? Anywhere in the universe, warmth and moisture in the right proportions is required for things to grow, to stay in that nourishing state. In our system, what is it that creates that warmth and moisture? I just want to give you a little bit of understanding of the digestive system beyond the biology class and beyond the confusing terms, the microbiotic terms that today is used in the medical world. Your digestive environment is like this really warm and moist place. How do I know? Because it has enzymes, hot digestive enzymes, which are in liquid form. So they're warm by nature, and it's in liquid form. That's warmth and moisture. Bile, which is produced by your liver to break down substances, to break down fats, again, is a warm and moist substance. Anywhere there is breakdown required. Any transformation it's required, whether you're charging your phone or the plants are doing photosynthesis, any transformation requires warmth. And these are all made in liquid substances in your body because you need moisture. There is mucosal lining, which is the most important thing, which means that your digestive system inside is a very gentle, soft system. It is protected by a phlegm, by like a thin liquid layer, which is called the mucosal lining. In our generation, mucosal lining is very depleted, but that mucosal lining really provides that kind of coating, protection, and moisture that your digestive system requires. A lot of people lose it because either they stop consuming good fats, because they consume extremely hot foods and they burn out their mucus lining. They do not have the perfect balance between warm and moist. And of course, we're going to talk about how you bring in warm and moist in your system and in your body. Even emotions, and that's my favorite part. That's an area I've done a lot of work on, is warm and moist emotions, and I'm going to kind of go into that as well. But I mean, just think of how a hug feels, right? A hug feels warm and moist. You're not going to say, oh my god, that was if it's a cold hug, it's a cold hug. It doesn't feel warm. And you meet a person who is warm, there's a moistness in their voice. There's like, you aren't going to say it was warm and dry. A person was warm and dry. No, a person is warm and moist when they are warm and loving and friendly and all of that. So we thrive in warm and moist, and we always want to assess warm and moist. I had a day yesterday where I became hot and humid. I had friends over who wanted to eat Indian, and I made pav bhaji morning and night. Body feels hot and humid. I felt hot and sweaty at night. It does not fail the concept of staying in that little range of warm and moist. Okay, so how do we keep our body warm and moist? How do we make this happen? Ayurveda had amazing ideas, and a lot of cultures in the world, without knowing, actually did that too. It's very simple. It's simpler than you wanted to know. Ayurveda is simpler than people think. It's very complicated. You have to move to the Himalayas to practice. All you do to have the warmth is keep good spices in your food. Now, I want to talk about what good spices are. Good spices are not spices that kind of burn your tongue. Anything that's called a spice but does not feel spicy on your tongue is a good spice. So whether it's cumin, whether it's mustard seeds, whether it's it's bay leaf. Thank you, Akash. Whether it's bay leaf, whether it's a cinnamon stick, whether it's cloves, all of that. Anything which you can put on your tongue and not burn it is a good spice, right? If you know, in India, there's the concept of, I don't know, it's different colloquial languages, it's said differently, but it's tadka, vaghar, I think fodani in some languages, where you take a good fat and you temper spices in it. That by itself, that concept of taking that good fat and tempering spices, hing and other spices, is how you bring in warm and moist to all your foods. I don't cook Indian every day, but even if I'm cooking, let's say a Mexican chili soup, I will always have that kind of tempering of spices, that tadka that we do, that sauteing of spices in a good fat. That is the $1 million suggestion for bringing in warm and moist in your foods. And what these good spices do, right? They bring in the warmth, but they also help. They also help to break down your food. It's very difficult to digest food without the help of these good spices. Once again, any transformation in the universe requires heat. And we see this all the time. I mean, you can't, like we said, you can't even charge your phone. You cannot have a light bulb on. You can't do anything unless there is heat to break down. So that good spices will support that. Again, cooked food is a big thing in Ayurveda. Raw foods are indicated as medicine in certain conditions for certain people. But if you want nourishment in your body, you want to support that warm and moist environment. Here in the US, I work with a lot of models who've gone on a long-term raw diet because it's become so important for us to stay in a certain body fat level, that we're basically constantly depleting our bodies. We're not nourishing our bodies. It's constant depletion. And then after like 5 or 10 years, all those models have such severe digestive issues, IBS, SIBO, all of those crazy diseases. So you want your food to be cooked, you want it to be warm in temperature, you want to have good spices. For the moisture, I'm going to repeat those good spices as well. For the moisture, you want to always use good fat. And the one thing that I want to tell you about fat, and Ayurveda explains this beautifully, right, is, the way we assess how much fat somebody eats is we actually assess in how much time they digest the fat. So we actually give plain krutapan at some point, which is plain, just good, plain ghee, and see how long it takes to digest. And you'll be shocked that it is really about your body getting used to it and you having that good digestive fire and good digestive environment. So there is no such thing. Like if you all see the amount of fat I eat, the amount of ghee I eat, if by normal standards, it should really bulk me up. But it doesn't when you have a good digestive fire. Those things don't really happen. But you want to make sure you start out small, get your body used to it. Automatically, your Agni will really, really become, if your Agni or your digestive fire will start functioning at its best when you start using good fat, in your foods by tempering the spices in it. And the good spices, again, are anything that does not feel spicy on your tongue, but is called a spice. And I will just give you some names. There's lots of them, but whether it's cumin or jeera, I'm going to say the Hindi names as well, because I know a lot of people probably relate to that better. So it's jeera, rai, mustard, hing, asafoetida, bay leaf or tej patta, cinnamon or I think dalchini, cloves or long. These are just very widely used spices, but you can use anything. You can use fennel or saunf. But making sure that you use some of those good spices in your fat. And if you're doing non-Indian, for example, when I do non-Indian, I will still use it. Even ajwain is a very good one. And so whatever is available to you at that point is definitely something that you want to use. But it doesn't have to be Indian spices. Good fat sauces. Okay, so not everybody wants to hear this. My favorite good fat sauce is ghee made well with A2 cows. And when ghee is made well with A2 cows, ghee has this property. I mean, in the West, ghee has blown up, right? You go to the famous health stores in the West, whether it's Whole Foods or even Trader Joe's, there's ghee everywhere. If it's a health store, there is ghee. And because researchers are like, we cannot figure out how is this cooked butter being able to go to your nervous tissue so well. So one of the biggest problems that we have is food cannot reach the nervous tissue. Warm and moist food actually does. If you see all the omega-3s, the DHA also has a basic quality of warm and moist. And what happens is that we burn out our nervous tissue as we go on. We have something called the myelin sheath on our nerves. And I want you guys to think about this, right? So when we have a wire, I actually can't see myself. That's one of the problems. When you have a wire, right, there's this insulation on top. A live wire has this kind of whatever plastic insulation on the top of it. And what happens is on your body, there's something called the myelin sheath. And it does the same job as this wire. It keeps the wire coated so that the impulses can travel at a steady speed, that nothing is electrocuted, that it's channeled where it needs to be channeled. And that myelin sheath is, again, it's like a jelly-like substance. So again, it's moist. Everywhere in your body, you require that warmth and moisture. The nerves are hot and the myelin sheath is moist. And that creates that balance of warmth and moisture. And we get depleted in that myelin sheath, and our nerves become really hot. Conditions like Parkinson's and all of those or motor neuron disease are really triggered because of the depletion of myelin sheath in your body. And what good fats like ghee does is they also go and replenish that myelin sheath. Omega-3s go and replenish that myelin sheath. Extremely important. There are some foods that are naturally moist, like sweet potatoes, like rice. Those are definitely really good to include in your, and you can tell when you have a moist food, you can tell it doesn't feel dry in your food. So it's not really going to be rocket science. And I love to add herbal teas. So any time in the day or night when you'll see me, I am always sitting with my cup of warm herbal tea. Herbal tea is not green tea. Herbal tea is not black tea. It's not white tea. Herbal tea is whether you have a chamomile or you have a licorice or you just throw in some mint in your tea. So I never drink plain water. I will always, I wake up to a tea, I sleep to a tea. So it's always that thing. So what is it? What are the foods that you don't eat then, right? So anything that's overly dry, all of these crazy diet foods, they say, hey, this is zero fat. And there's so much pride around that zero fat. It is really destroying your body. And I have seen this with so many people. I mean, like I said, I've come from a place where I've seen two people living up into the late 90s with lean bodies, not overly lean, not depleted, lean, healthy bodies, still being able to walk, perfect numbers on a blood report. And these are some of the principles that were very, very importantly followed. So no dry foods, dry, like even for example, right, when people have roti or fulka, that little bit of ghee on it goes a long, long way. And I also want to tell you guys, my weight does not, touch wood, stays in the range of 1.5 kg. Doesn't matter where in the world I go, because I follow these principles, which does not mean I don't indulge, but which means I'll keep my food warm and I will make sure that it has good in fat. And my weight just never fluctuates, I think, because following these principles. And no cold. So having cold water, having cold milkshakes, once in a while to indulge is fine, but not as a primary staple. When you have cold, you're literally taking that warm. It's like a really cold snow shower in the middle of a summer day. And that does good for nobody. Definitely not good for the flora and fauna. And we understand this outside, but we don't understand this inside. And those harsh diets as well do the same thing. They again deplete your system. No raw. Again, I want to say the concept of raw foods is less than 100. It's maybe about 100 years old on the planet to eat this level of raw food. When fire was discovered 1 billion years ago, the rate at which Homo sapiens evolved was exponential. And no stale foods, absolutely no stale foods. Okay.
Sounds good.
And I love this one. I love this this warm and moist in the mind as well. And of course, this is just based on my study and research and understanding, right? So in Ayurveda, there's a concept of guna and karma, which means that everything according to its guna or property will have a karma or action in your body. The whole science is based on that, right? So when you look at emotions, they all have qualities. And when we have these emotions often enough, we are altering the chemical environment, the ecosystem inside our body. And that's why this is my easiest way to explain how mind affects the body, right? For example, anger is hot. It's a very, very hot emotion. You can sweat, you feel the heat in your body right away. Again, temperature changed. Anxiety is actually it's a very drying feeling, because what happens when a thought stays in your nervous system? Anxiety is usually, when you have a thought, it either goes into an action bin, or I don't know what's going to happen to this bin. And anxiety is like, it's like you cannot put it in the action bin. So it's like, I don't know what it's going to happen. It keeps ruminating. Anything that ruminates or travels in your nervous system picks up pace, it dries you out. The concept of that movement aggravates something called vata, and it dries you out. So anxiety long term is very drying. People end up staying up, they get dry skin, they get eczema. Stress is hot, and it can become again drying, because long-term stress is like in anxiety, but in the short term stress, people heat up when they're stressed and they have short-term goals to meet, again altering the environment. People who withdraw, right, kind of get depressive, kind of disconnect, and you see this right away. It's sluggish. When you get sluggish, your body actually gets overly humid. You start accumulating more fluids. People even put on weight when they become like this. Fear again is dry, jealousy is hot, depression is sluggish, love is warm and moist. And you feel that. Gratitude is warm and moist. Compassion is warm and moist. A tear that comes out, the compassionate tear is warm and moist. When you feel tearful because of compassion, there's a warmth and moisture about it. So all of these positive emotions, everything that is bringing you closer to life is warm and moist. And warm, not hot, guys. So how are we going to bring this in, right? How are we going to bring this in? Some of the ideas that I give is physical touch, hugs. Oxytocin is something that's released when you hug somebody, and especially for women. And that's a very warm and moist neurotransmitter hormone. Massages, bring that out in you. Gratitude journaling, because the more gratitude you practice, the more warmth and moisture. Compassion, meditation, and sleep also really promote that warmth and moisture in your system.